What's going on YouTube? WildLion Games here, and as you've probably heard by now, EA is selling their company and going private in a massive $55 billion deal. But what does this mean for their products and their licenses with Madden, Battlefield, FC, and other titles? How will this deal, if at all, affect the Madden development cycle and their licenses with companies like the UFC and the NFL? That's what I'm here to break down. And before we get into those speculations, it's important to understand some of the terminology behind this deal and the facts and what it all means. So first off is, what is a private company? It is a company owned by a smaller group of investors that could be private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, wealthy individuals, etc., rather than public shareholders. So when you hear about a company going private, that means that the company, which was previously being traded on the public stock market, will be bought out and its shares delisted from the public exchanges. After that, it becomes a privately held company. And then, your group of investors, like I mentioned, private equity firms, wealthy individuals, will propose to buy all or a controlling share of the outstanding shares the company has set at a set price. So what will this mean in EA's case? Well, as a private company, EA is no longer going to have to worry about issuing quarterly earnings reports to the public. They won't have to deal with the public market volatility in the same way. And as a consortium, which is a fancy word for an association formed of several businesses or individuals, that's what was formed in purchasing this. It was Silver Lake, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, and Affinity Partners. EA shareholders will receive $210 per share in cash, and once the acquisition closes, which is expected to be the first quarter of 2027, EA shares will no longer be listed on public markets. So basically, EA will shift from being a public company to being controlled by a private group of investors, and that's the factual base of what's happening right now. Now, you also might be interested in knowing, okay, they've been bought out by Silver Lake, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, and Affinity Partners. What do these three companies do? So out of these three businesses in this association that was formed to buy out EA, Silver Lake makes the most sense. It's a private equity firm focused on technology and technology-enabled investments. And just to name a few companies that you would be familiar with that have been acquired at some point in time, they don't still hold shares in some of these companies anymore. They have been sold, but companies such as Broadcom, Sabre, Skype, GoDaddy, Dell, Motorola, Ancestry.com, SoFi, Credit Karma, GoodRx, AMC, Waymo, Twitter, Airbnb, Expedia, and now in 2025, Electronic Arts. One that people are unsure about is the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund. It is a sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia, and if you don't know what a sovereign wealth fund is, it is a state-owned investment fund that invests in real and financial assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, precious metals, and then alternative investments like private equity funds or hedge funds. You might have heard about them with some of their acquisitions, such as taking over Newcastle United. You've heard about LIV Golf, and some other companies that they have acquisitions in include Lucid Motors, Uber, and Blackstone. And I get that some people might have their moral qualms about this, but this public investment fund from Saudi Arabia has their hands in a lot of different pots. They have stakes in Uber, they have stakes in Capcom, Live Nation Concert, they have Citigroup, Boeing, Berkshire Hathaway, Walt Disney, Bank of America, WeWork, Take-Two Interactive, Activision, and Nintendo. So the thing is like a lot of these products that we use day-to-day basis, this public investment fund from Saudi Arabia, they have a lot of stake in, in a bunch of different stuff. The weird one to me is the Affinity Partners. It's an investment firm that was formed in 2021 by Donald Trump's son-in-law, who also served as his senior advisor in his first presidency. Most of their stakes and shares and acquisitions, I'm not like a financial expert, but from what I understand, most of what they own is is in regard to Israel, like Israel startups, along with like a couple other big, it's like Saudi government stuff. So that one always seems like the odd one out of these three companies, but essentially, there's all the facts for what we're looking at in this deal. And now let's get into the fun stuff of what this actually means for EA and Madden. So why would EA go private now? I mean, there's a few possible motivations. You can have reduced pressure from the public markets. A private company like EA, like they are going to be now, they're not going to have to issue these quarterly earnings reports and worry about share price fluctuations. So they could make longer term strategic bets without the short term market backlash. And this could also be some sort of strategic alignment and control. Private investors are going to have greater control over strategic decisions and capital allocation, and restructuring. So if EA wants to make big changes, they can doing those, whether that's like investing heavily in new tech, shifting platforms, they're going to be able to do that stuff in the private market a lot easier. So I think the big question is, will this affect their Madden NFL license? This is more speculative, but there are some potential scenarios here. The NFL license isn't going anywhere. I mean, unless there's like a specific clause allowing the termination or change of control, EA's existing agreements with the NFL for the Madden video game will remain valid unless one party like triggers something that, both sides refuse. The NFL might look more closely at the new ownership, especially given this Affinity group and the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They might demand assurances about compliance, IP, revenue sharing, etc. And there could be reputational or geopolitical sensitivities due to the nature of Saudi Arabia that the NFL may want to consider, depending on what their own policies are, if they want to be involved with this. In short, I don't expect the license to be canceled or changed, but the terms and the execution and the strategy behind Madden could shift under this new ownership. And speaking of the NFL, when it comes to Madden, EA's freedom is still going to be capped by the terms of the NFL license. So going private isn't going to necessarily fix a lot of the issues that we want gone. Like the NFL has its set content rules that they've been very protective of with their brand. And, that includes like how we don't see helmets flying off anymore. We don't see concussions or head trauma or injury animations like the carts coming onto the field. There's no cheerleaders on the sideline, limited celebrations. There's a lot of stuff that the NFL doesn't want in the game, and that's not going anywhere. EA going private, it's not going to override those rules. And so what we're seeing now is going to be the same, public or private. Now, where EA could get more creative under private ownership is in their gameplay system, their NFL modes, their unlicensed projects, and just being experimental. So, the bottom line is going private may free EA from the Wall Street pressures, but the NFL license terms still rule Madden. And I would like to talk about the two routes this could possibly go. We have the negative possibilities of EA going private, and then we also have the positive aspects that could happen by EA going private. So let's start with the negatives, right? We'll go, give me the bad, and then we'll do the good. So the bad is potential of less transparency. As a public company, EA had to publish quarterly earning reports, answer to analysts, and then face scrutiny when things go wrong and bad reviews. A private company isn't going to need to disclose as much. And so us as fans and the players, we may have less visibility into EA's directions and accountability. It could also just continue to skew into this misleading marketing, if you will. EA over the last few years has really leaned on its influencers and their content creators who mostly promote hype and ignore the shortcomings of the game. And with less public scrutiny, they might just double down on this strategy, being able to control the narrative more tightly than before and rewarding the positive influencers even more than they could before and freeze out those critics. And the other bad thing is we could end up seeing heavier Ultimate Team monetization being put into the game. So the buyout is funded with debt, and private owners oftentimes prioritize cash flow and profitability to pay that debt down quickly. And so that could mean more microtransactions for Madden. That means more Ultimate Team monetization and less investment in non-revenue features like Superstar Mode and Franchise Mode. And if Madden and FIFA FC are like the cash cows of EA, the owners also might prioritize maintaining revenue instead of taking creative risks. So that could actually make Madden even more stagnant than it currently is, because these private investors could choose, safety over bold innovations. And this is the scary part of EA going private. When they have to answer to the public and deal with shares, they can't just sit on their heels. And, with sales declining and ratings declining every year with Madden year after year after year, and, the college football game for 26 versus 25 not being as great, this is a scary moment because we could see even less innovation than they're already putting in, because they won't need to. They're going to be privately owned, so those private investors should just be like, yeah, we don't care. We're just going to continue pumping money into the cash cow of Ultimate Team and microtransactions. Now, I don't want to end on a negative note, so let's talk about what EA could do now that they're owned by a private equity fund, essentially. And there are multiple options for innovation here. One is gameplay. Maybe they could build a true physics tackling engine, build on that backbreaker style of real-time physics and real-time collisions, better player weight, speed dynamics, adaptive AI for smarter opponent play calling, all that sort of stuff. We could see innovation with franchise mode and owner mode, with deeper scouting and drafting, dynamic team personalities with player morale, locker room morale coming up, fan backlash, player conflicts, things of that nature. And maybe we get a better owner mode with ticket pricing, stadium upgrades, fan engagement, giving owner mode that depth again. We could see boosts to career mode and superstar mode with off-the-field life of sponsorship deals and media interviews. Think of fan reputation like NBA 2K. We could have a choice-driven narrative. And maybe we get our positions back with, offensive line and defensive line, or being able to play safety and things of that nature. We could see a boost in presentation and immersion with crowd and atmosphere, historic teams and eras. So there's a lot of things. Going private could free EA to rebuild actually Madden's foundations with physics and AI and franchise depth without that pressure from shareholders. But it could also mean less accountability, more monetization, and tighter control over criticism. We don't know, because there is a business fact that EA needs to make money. They need to keep their shareholders happy in the current state that EA has been existing in. And that could be a reason why we don't see those risks being taken. It's too risky. They can't risk EA stock falling too far by all right, you know what, we're going to totally overhaul gameplay. We're doing a new engine. And then, what if it fails, right? Their shares tank and things can get really bad for the company. So it's just safer to keep things as is and continue, making updates to Ultimate Team and things of that nature. Now, what they're going to do, I don't know. I'm not in the boardroom, but that's kind of what the two paths are. So essentially, if you've been wondering what this means for your favorite sports video games and for Battlefield and of that nature, we don't really know yet, because we don't know, what the shareholders are going to want to do. And maybe this is something that has nothing to do with creativity. It could just be a purely business acquisition and nothing changes at all. Nothing gets worse, nothing gets better. We don't know. These are just the possibilities. So there you go. There you have it. I know it's a different video from me instead of doing reviews, but I thought I would present the facts to this deal and then offer my thoughts on, what could be going on behind the scenes. And again, this deal isn't supposed to wrap up until 2027, so if anything, we may not be seeing any of these changes until Madden 28, 29, 30, something like that. And, it could be a couple more years. I think the interesting thing is going to be with the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund. I know that that's a big issue for a lot of people. We don't know what the NFL is going to think about that. 2K might look into this and start talking to the NFL. We don't know. Again, it's all speculation. Anything you hear is speculation. Just the facts is they are now going to be a privately owned company by Silver Lake, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, and Affinity partners. So That's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know I said I had a FC26 review coming. It is. I just haven't gotten around to playing it as much as I would like to. And I know this was more of like a podcast style video with not a lot of visual, exciting edits, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And that's it. Until next time, peace.